stay to the end of this session, and I'm going to leave you with 3 powerful healing affirmations. So today we're talking about Demi Moore, who is the adult daughter of alcoholics and who grew up with severe trauma as a child, and her marriage to Ashton Kutcher. In her own words, she was addicted to Ashton Kutcher. And I wanted to offer this session for my audience because so many of us are adult daughters of narcissistic mothers and fathers, adult daughters of alcoholics who, very much like Demi, have had childhoods wrought with chaos. By the time Demi Moore was 12 years old, she was saving her mother from a suicide attempt. Now just imagine you're 12 years old, your parents are partiers, they're alcoholics, your home is incredibly unstable. You hear your father scream for you. You're 12 years old. You rush, you find your mom on the floor, and your father is screaming for you to stick your little fingers down your mother's throat, into her mouth, to pull pills out. In her memoir, Demi Moore talks about this being the end of her childhood. The end of her childhood. And I would argue that she never had a childhood, which is a hallmark of being the adult child of an alcoholic. You do not have a childhood. By the time Demi was 14, 15 years old, her mother was bringing her to bars as a lure. Her mother believed that if she brought Demi with her, that men would pay attention to them and buy them drinks. Demi also talks about how her mom, who seems to have had incredibly high narcissistic traits, loved when people told her she did not look her age. This is a source of narcissistic supply. And we also want to understand how in this situation where this very fragile, alcoholic, narcissistic mother, in my own opinion, she was a narcissistic mother, we want to think about what was really going on in this situation, because in my opinion, it exemplifies completely, in a very transparent manner, how a narcissistic mother, a narcissistic parent uses their children as an extension and uses them as a means to an end. In this situation, Demi's mother was not a mother. She wasn't even a friend. Demi was a source of narcissistic supply. The mom wanted to be supplied with alcohol. She wanted to numb her pain, obviously. And her daughter was not her daughter in that moment. She was just a tool. She was an extension. She was a means to an end. So Demi did not have a protector. She didn't even have a friend. She had a mother that brought her to the den of the wolves. I mean, just think about that. This is the epitome of how a narcissistic mother views her daughter. She's just a means to an end. A daughter needs to be protected by a mother bear. Demi did not have a mama bear. It is like walking out into a savage world without skin, with your heart and your lungs and your blood vessels being exposed. Your mother is supposed to be the lioness that protects you from the wolves in the forest. And here Demi's mother brought her right to the den of wolves. It gets worse. Poor Demi. When she was 15, her mother, although it's not clearly defined, the story, or I'm explaining it loosely, and you can look it up, you can Google this information, you could read her memoir, but what I took away was that the mom allowed the landlord, who is an older man, to be in the apartment when Demi got home. And this man, and this is a trigger warning for anyone out there listening, this man raped Demi at 15 years old, and when he was done, said, "How does it feel to have your mom whore you out for $500? Demi has said, "I don't know if that's entirely true, that the man gave my mom money for this experience, but I know that my mother created the situation in which this could happen." Now, it could be that Demi's ego was trying to protect her from thinking it was that bad. That is a form of trafficking. It could be that she really can't go there because that would be so devastating, and I don't think any of us would judge her for that. That's completely understandable. That type of trauma is very hard to come back from. And when it is tied to the parent, it is absolutely, it just adds another layer of it. And so it is understandable that if this is something that Demi cannot psychologically process, it makes sense that she can't. But we do know that there was a man in her apartment. It was the landlord. And we know that he said these things. And we can all draw our own conclusions from that conversation and those facts. I want to talk a little bit about how this leads to the love addiction that she had with Ashton Kutcher. So Demi Moore was married 3 times. Not uncommon for adult daughters of narcissistic alcoholic mothers. Not uncommon that we have no healthy sense of self. We don't know where our value comes from. We don't even think we have value. Not uncommon for us to cling to people that we think represent some form of stability, even if we're not happy. We even couple with people out of survival, but we don't know it. Demi talks about cheating on her first husband the night before they were supposed to be married, and upon reflection, realizing that she was really reeling from the death of her father, who took his own life, and her throwing herself into this relationship with her first husband, the man whose name she took, Moore, who was a musician. She talks about how she realizes that she just couldn't face telling him the truth, that rather than going and telling him, this is what I'm feeling, this is the confusion that I'm feeling about marrying you, she escaped and she met up with someone that she knew, had sex with him, and went ahead with the marriage. And so this also speaks to something that adult daughters of narcissistic mothers do, and daughters of alcoholics do. We hide and we lie. And it's a trauma response. We don't know how to tell the truth. We don't know how to stand in our own skin. Everything is super confusing. We don't know how to stand in the truth of how we feel about the other person. We have this it's an overwhelming need to feel secured to someone, and that taints our ability to be honest with that person, especially if what we're feeling is going to threaten that attachment to that person, even if we are unhappy. So this is not uncommon. Many of you, including myself, will see yourself in Demi Moore's actions and reactions. And again, this is all before codependent recovery. This is all before her own recovery from alcoholism. This is how you behave. These are autonomic stress responses. They are tied to our false identity, our false sense of unworthiness. So our identity is skewed. Our behavior is then skewed and marked by this false identity. It's all unconscious. It's automatic. It's tied into our nervous system, and things always get worse before they get better. So Demi is married once. She cheated on her husband, marries him anyway. That relationship falls apart. She marries Bruce Willis. Then that relationship falls apart. She has 3 daughters with Bruce Willis. She ultimately marries Ashton Kutcher, 15 years younger than her. And this is where her unhealed trauma begins to surface big time. I have seen this in my own life. I have seen it in the life of my clients. I see it in the lives of the people that I research. This is what happens. We're done with having children. Our lives are pretty much settled, and our trauma starts to surface. During a divorce, adult daughters of narcissists, adult daughters of alcoholics, we feel like we have been thrown backwards into this bottomless, dark pit. We're falling backwards, we're free falling, and there is nothing for us to cling to. We're just free falling. We oftentimes revert back during incredible life challenges like a divorce, back to the age we were when we experienced significant trauma. So Demi has already said in interviews that she felt like a teenager when she bumped into Ashton Kutcher. Makes sense, because so much of her trauma goes back to when she was 12, 13, 14, and 15 years old. So I would argue that Demi reverted back and regressed to the age of a 14-year-old girl when she met Kutcher, which is why she didn't behave, or she admits that she had no control over herself. She literally lost herself, and everything was about Ashton Kutcher. So much so that her children felt it. Her daughters could feel the obsession that she had with Kutcher. I myself have gone through this, not to such an extreme, but there was a very short period of time after my divorce where this happened. I became obsessed with a man, and I knew that it was wrong, but I couldn't fix it. And it wasn't until, and I've talked about this in prior episodes, I call it the drop the mop moment. It was when it hit me that, oh my God, this is a craving. This is an addiction. Love addiction is incredibly strong. It takes you over, and it's because it's tied to survival, because it's tied to the chemical oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone. The brain can't tell the difference between bonding to someone who is healthy and bonding to a pseudo parent who is unhealthy. And in this situation with Demi, she had two very unhealthy parents who required her to morph and lose herself in order to maintain the shreds of attachment that she had to them. Walks in Ashton Kutcher after a divorce, no doubt in my opinion that all of her abandonment trauma, all of her abandonment wounds, all of her not enough stuff surfaces, and now Ashton Kutcher is the person, the pseudo-savior that she is going to bend to the will of in order to feel seen and heard by this character in her life that represented the people in her past that hurt her the most, i.e. mother and father. So when it comes to Ashton Kutcher, very interesting. And I think that this is an important thing for us to flesh out as adult daughters, and it will change your life if you get it. So Ashton Kutcher says to her, he knows that she's in recovery, right? And he says to her, I don't think alcoholism is a thing. I think it's all about moderation. Let me explain to you how the adult daughter of a narcissist, how the adult daughter of an alcoholic mother and father, or one internalizes that when she is in recovery. In my humble opinion, Demi Moore heard what she internalized was, the man that I love doesn't want me to be in recovery. The man that I love doesn't want me to be sober. The man that I love likes to party. And we know this about Ashton Kutcher. He liked to party. I don't know about it. I don't know if he likes to party anymore since he's married and has a few kids. But back then, we know that he liked to party. The man that I love likes to take shots once in a while, tequila shots once in a while. And he wants me to take tequila shots once in a while. The man that I love is much younger than me, and he's still in this party scene. And what I hear him saying is, I'm not allowed to be sober. I'm not allowed to honor myself and my sobriety if I want to be with him. I better abandon my sobriety and break sobriety in order to keep this man that I'm addicted to in a codependent way in my life. I am nothing without this man in my life. I cannot survive without this man in my life. That's the way the adult daughter of a narcissist or an alcoholic will internalize a statement like that. Now, am I saying that Ashton Kutcher twisted Demi Moore's arm and told her, you should not drink? I don't want to be with a woman that doesn't party and can't hang with me. I don't want to be with a 41-year-old sober mom who's responsible and is trying to represent sobriety for her kids. I want to party. Did he twist her arm? No. But here's the thing. You never have to twist the arm of an adult child, an adult daughter of a narcissist. You never have to twist the arm of the adult daughter of an alcoholic. You never have to twist our arm. That's before recovery. After recovery, we're not going to lose ourselves ever again. We're always going to put ourselves first. We're going to be able to see through that. And a healthier Demi, which I'm sure she is much healthier today, would say, I'm not going to risk my sobriety and lose myself to please you. I don't care how cute or how hot you are, not doing it. Let the chips fall where they may. A healthier, more recovered adult daughter of a narcissist or an alcoholic, a recovered codependent daughter could and should and does say that no matter how much she loves that person. I've done it. I've been there. I took risks like that very early on in my relationship with my now husband, Anthony, and let the chips fall. I was willing to let the chips fall when they may, or they would, early on in our relationship, because I needed to let him know I'm not going to lose myself to keep you. But adult daughters of alcoholics, we're already lost. We're already lost. And what happened with Demi, I think, was after the breakup with Bruce, it was a very, I would say, an abyss moment for her, where everything was unfamiliar and everything that was held at bay through that marriage, boom, came to the surface. That's what happens to us, and I'm sure many of you can resonate with that. Ashton Kutcher also wanted to have threesomes, which is something that Demi Moore felt extremely uncomfortable with. But once again, an adult daughter will abandon the self for the sake of keeping the relationship intact. This is the crux of codependency. It is a maladaptive over-reliance on another person, often at the expense of self. So here are two situations, and there were probably hundreds, if not thousands, of other situations in which this relationship required Demi Moore to lose herself to keep the relationship afloat. The one relationship was Demi Moore gave up her sobriety to make Ashton Kutcher happy. The next situation was Demi Moore going against her sexual boundaries to keep Ashton Kutcher happy. And from the research that I've done, it doesn't sound like Ashton Kutcher is taking very much any accountability for this. And I get why, because when you look at an adult who's 41 years old, you think like, why didn't she just set boundaries? Why didn't she just say no? We have to understand, because the world probably isn't going to. We as adult daughters of narcissists, adult daughters of alcoholics, we have to know that in most cases is an impossibility for us, because it is our wounded inner child that is in this relationship with other people. We can look like big women. We can look like Hollywood starlets. We could be all professional, but when it comes to interpersonal relationships with people that we are in relationships with, when we have unresolved trauma, we are in relationships, or the aspect of us that's in that relationship is the most wounded part of us. Now, I would argue that this whole experience was a way for Demi Moore to have what was below the veil come up through the veil, to be brought to the light, albeit through pain and suffering, but it was still brought to the light. For Demi Moore to go on Red Table, Good Morning America, and write her memoir and say, I was addicted to Ashton Kutcher, this was codependency, is a huge thing. It's a huge wake-up call, and many of us can benefit. And I'm so thankful that she had the courage to tell her story, because none of this was her fault, and I really hope that she's happy today. The last thing that I want to mention that adult daughters of alcoholics and narcissists must be aware of is this idea that it is generational. Not only alcoholism, codependency is generational. Her daughter Tallulah speaks very candidly about feeling like she lost her mother when Demi started drinking again, because she had had a sober mom until Ashton Kutcher. And she speaks very candidly about not knowing who was going to walk through the door. Now, this was Demi, right? Her mother surfacing in her. It happens. We swear it won't happen to us, but we become our mothers sometimes. And Tallulah talks about how she felt not enough, which is the repeat of how Demi felt about her own mother. And then Tallulah talks about how she got involved with drugs and alcohol like her own mother did. And then she goes as far as to admit that she feels like the crux of her addiction issues lies with love addiction and codependency. And I think this is really important information, because understanding ourselves is so crucial to recovery. And those of us who are trying to figure out, like, why do I do these things? So oftentimes, and I know this was my story, I was so wrought with shame over some of the things that I did and that I said before I really understood what was happening, the abandonment trauma, the alcoholism in my family. My mother was a dry alcoholic. My grandmother was an active alcoholic. All of my grandparents were active alcoholics, even like Demi. History of suicide in our family. Very similar histories. And so many of you have also similar histories to Demi, and thank goodness she's speaking about it publicly, and kudos for her. But I think it's so important that we recognize that understanding ourselves is key, because what happens is if you are codependent, you will be able to reflect on your actions, unlike a narcissist, and you will feel the shame and the embarrassment and the humiliation. You will feel the sorrow of what you've put your children through. And that oftentimes is so overpowering, because shame is like one of the worst feelings a human can feel. It is so far away from love. So if you imagine shame being a very low, dank vibration, and people will carry vibrations, right? Oh, I don't like her vibe, I don't like his vibe, whatever. We all carry a particular vibe. An adult daughter who was wrought in shame from childhood and who is now an adult and who is having her boundaries violated, or she's violating her own boundaries and she knows it. And she knows that her actions are affecting her children, but she can't seem to stop. She's got no footing. The shame of that can really pull you under like an undertow. And it makes healing impossible at that point. But when we hear the stories of other people and we see that they made it through the other side, then it makes looking at what we've done, albeit it was automatic and subconscious, we weren't even in control over it, it makes it more palatable so that we can actually continue the healing journey. And so I hope that anyone out there can look at Demi's story and see that she's come through the other side, and that even her children and she have made peace with the past. They understand the generational trauma. This is something that Demi's mother never did, and more than likely Demi's grandmother never did. So we have 3-4 generations later, they get it. They're breaking the cycle. And that's something that Demi should be proud of, despite what's happened in her life. And it's something that I am proud of too. Despite what I've done, I'm proud of the fact that I was able to break cycles that my mother and my grandmother never could, or my great-grandmother never could. I want to leave you with a few affirmations today. One of them is, I no longer rescue at the cost of my own life. I no longer survive to make someone else comfortable. I don't need to disappear for love. You can heal, you are worthy, and you are enough.